Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together with their randomly designed and randomly organized story elements. We combine them together to make a story that you can listen to and listen to and listen to. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. This is the final episode of God of Gems, a story that has taken a couple different hard left turns, which I think is great for any story. I love Deus Ex Machina like events that come in and really change things up. I'm going to just do a quick recap so that we know where we are. We are on a planet that was seeded by some other nameless third type 3 civilization. They didn't put any races on the planet, but they did bury millions of sapphires of different color types. These sapphires were like sort of a specially designed system in order to terraform the planet to their specific needs. Little did they know there was a race. There was a race that was currently evolving on the planet, maybe from some previous alien seeding, maybe just a race. They were slightly humanoid. We'll say they were from some previous alien seeding. They basically buried these sapphires on the planet and said, we'll get back to it in a couple million years once it's kind of, it's going to work out for us. Humans from a different world came, lost all their technology, and basically had to start again. They had some light telepathy, some light telepathy abilities, and they found that when paired with the sapphires of different colors, they could get different powers. Now, it would amplify the powers they already had. So, like blue would make it so they could read people's thoughts. And the bigger the sapphire and the closer it was to their head, the more powerful it was. Red made it so they could move things with their mind. Sapphires, the ruby is just a red sapphire. And there's lots of different types of sapphires, including a clear sapphire. And so basically gods rose up. People who could use the biggest sapphires and subjugated everyone and became known as the Divine Council. Our hero is a person who has this kind of telepathy ability. He is unfound and unresearched, so he's not in any sort of formal training at this present moment, but he does find a sapphire that is clear, which is pretty rare. It looks kind of like a diamond, but I don't think it looks exactly like a diamond, right, Reed? It's right. It doesn't look like a diamond. Diamonds refract light differently than this does.
Right, and it is dramatically different. Chemical makeup is different from diamond, just
and it allows him to teleport, which is his special ability that makes him better than everyone else. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Heroes are better than everyone else.
They're special.
The natives of the planet who evolved from the planet they kind of do like bending, like an avatar, but it's not as pronounced, but it's kind of frequency based. So it's really small, but they can kind of build up power over time. And we haven't really gotten into the story or like who's the bad guy or anything, but there's been a lot of conflict between the Divine Council and the basically the people who train in this kind of channeling, drafting kind of ability. There's been some conflict because it's like power that the gods don't have. And so they kind of want to stamp them out. So I imagine that there's some sort of conflict there. The real conflict happens when the Type 3 civilization sends their drone ships to the planet to clear cut the planet, dump a bunch of waste, and allow it to fertilize. So basically, they're going to nuke the planet and then let it fertilize again. So like you do to like a little plot of land or something. You just drive in, cut down all the trees, lay them over, throw some stuff on the ground, and then leave for a couple more years while it kind of builds back up again. So a super, not a malicious enemy, but one that just doesn't have any idea that these people exist or that they're going through this whole struggle. The quartet members are there's three basically masters or pseudo masters of this channeling side. I imagine them kind of like living up in the mountains. And we have the hero who has this clear sapphire, which he can use to teleport. Am I missing anything, guys?
No, just the names. You have
Okay, let's hear the names.
Well, I like Fanuel and Ali. Fanuel is the fire and earth. I think what's the word? Channeler. The water and air is Alish, and they're kind of apprenticing Dan, and it gets been decided which way Dan's going to go with it.
Right. And I feel like at some point they're going to meet up with Bartholomew, who is the hero.
Right.
And that's one of the rules that I had for this story is that everything has to have a name. So I have history for this story element. Reed, what do you have?
Wise old woman.
And I have happy ending.
You have happy ending. So should I go first?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Yeah. So in the middle history, right? We know the old history. People came from another world and, and the people who are descendants of the humans who came from another world, they have a lot of, They have a lot of lore about how we came about, the Divine Council, the set of 5 or so super psychics who have access to these really powerful sapphires, they have information based on, they know basically where they came from. A lot of the information that they have, however, is really highly dressed up as well. A lot of it's kept more in mysticism because they don't really have a concept of space flight. So, the seeding gods came in their space boats or however they say it, they came from 7-9. And so the planet was 7-9, but now it's 7-9. 7-9 now. Just stuff like that. And I would say it's been a couple hundred years since the ships came with the original human inhabitants. The history that I am going to speak to is the history of native versus not invader, but colonizer. Colonizer by necessity, right? They didn't come into this area because they wanted to. They came into this area where they found these sapphires because they had originally sort of started a city, and then there was a lot of volcanic activity that drove them away from all of their sort of main power cells and stuff like that, and their big generators, and they were kind of forced back into a medieval lifestyle because they didn't have the means to sort of create anything else. And so there was at first a lot of conflict between the natives, basically, and the refugees, basically, is what they ended up being more. Not invaders or colonizers, because they didn't want to be here. This wasn't near the equator where things were better. This was in the harsher part of the world, but it was better because of there was no seismic activity here. And so the history is that there was a lot of conflict originally. And at first, the refugees, the humans, won every single fight, right? Because they didn't even need this whole sapphire thing that they were just starting to get an inkling of, because they had automatic weapons, they had, surface to air, they could create surface to air missiles. They didn't need air missiles. They could create drones that could fire missiles. They had radar. They had all these super complex things. But as time wore on, and it went from having, oh yeah, we've got 600,000 missile batteries left, to, okay, we've got 500 missile batteries left, to, okay, that was the last of the missile batteries, right? And the natives, who were, of course, native, and they had this kind of reverberation magic really well established in their systems, were able to sort of take in a lot of punishment, to the place that there were legends of a couple of them who could vibrate their bodies to the place that the bullets that would fly at them would just like pass through them. Crazy stuff like that. And so as things kind of went along, and as the human refugees sort of got more peasant, had to start, okay, you know, we're now using the hand loads of bullets that we've been able to create, and they're not as powerful, you know, they're not as efficient, they jam, you know, it's just, as things begin to break down, the natives really kind of started to win. And there was a moment, and I feel like this culminated around sort of the discovery of one of the giant sapphires, where the refugees basically blew up a nuke. Like, they had them and they'd been kind of decommissioning them to make power generators for their systems, but the military commander, Commander Jason Zader, had sort of kept one in reserve at all times in case they needed it for something military or strategic, you know? And he became known as, basically, it's said that Devon, he's the father of Devon.
Okay.
Devon being the red god, the god of war.
No, Devon was.
I thought it was Shaitar.
Oh, Shaitar. Sorry. Yeah, Shaitar. Whoever was the god of war. He's
Shaitar.
known as the god of Shaitar, right? He didn't have any of the ability himself, but the large force of natives, 20 or 30,000 of them were coming through and they were holding them off, and he sort of completely destroyed and decimated them. And it was such a psychological switch, like the total and complete destruction of it, that it drove the natives, what was left of them, because this was like them. This wasn't like 20,000 of the natives. This was the natives
gathered together for
we're
going to get these pesky upstarts down once for all, right?
And he killed 90% of them, right, in a single moment. And so they sort of fled off into the mountains, and we didn't hear about them for dozens and almost hundreds of years. They kind of became like the Aiel, like from Wheel of Time, where you know about them, you know that they exist, but like the average person just really hasn't ever seen one. So that's part of the history. And then from that, part of the history is that the gods in legend vanquished certain great warriors, certain great enemies, as it were. And these were actually real people, real warriors, real drafters, or real channelers, real frequency freaks, real people of these natives who were like insane, and each of the gods has a person that it said that they arrested power from, and the truth is that the god, whichever god it was that can control the weather a little bit, the native that they defeated actually could control the weather really efficiently, but they were killed. And so now the Divine Council is really pales in comparison to what the world was kind of shaping up to be before.
Right.
So that's kind of the history. So I don't want to say necessarily that there's going to be racism when the content members kind of meet the hero Bartholomew, and they kind of figure out if their paths are supposed to cross or go together. But there's definitely going to be like, what's the opposite of optimism?
Pessimism.
No, not pessimism. Hesitation. It's definitely going to be like, I've heard the weird customs you guys do, It's like, do you really like pound on a drum for 20 days straight during your name day? And it's like, well, how else would you align all of your spirits? And like what it's doing is it's their name day, and so they're aligning all of their frequency all to one thing to figure out who it is that they're supposed to be. So they have to pound on a drum for, whatever.
Yeah.
It's weird cultural differences between the two, that really stand out and can cause conflict. And I think are causing conflict as more and more of the natives are coming down out of the mountains and starting to raid the edges. And people kind of think that there's only, there's probably only about 10,000 of them.
Right.
But, there isn't.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's the history.
Cool. I might as well introduce the wise old woman. Her name's Epona, which means protectress of horses. And she was born and raised and continues to work in husbandry. The original, human mission there included scientists and experts in husbandry and horticulture because for one of their animals, they brought in, not, a lot of horses and pigs, but they brought embryos, and they grew, they stocked their farms. And one of the things that they had to do is use their skills to blend. Like a horse couldn't live very long on this world because they couldn't metabolize the slightly genetically different forage. So they learned to blend, crossbreed with a beast. They're known as runner beasts, but they were like the indigenous horses, so to speak. And Epona's family had for generations been working. They supplied horses. Horses, as technology failed, horsepower began, to take preeminence in it, for work animals and for war animals. And so this was a profitable and important and fairly high status business. And they had large holdings. The area of land that they controlled, to have forage for their beasts and for growing food for the cold seasons and all that. And she had worked always from the time she was a girl in working with the horses, training, breeding, and the holdings had passed down to her brothers, and they had died, and her husband then ran the family estate, but she was just busied herself with working. Well, the secret, she had learned to use the sapphires, and she found these pale blue sapphires that allowed her to be kind of a horse whisperer. She could use telepathy to talk to horses, and or the runner beasts, whatever you call them. And she began to, kind of figured out that the whole divine council thing was it was probably gem based, because she found gems, and she had a hat that she always wore, and she had her gems in there. She had red, she had teal, green, and she had horses are very emotional based. So if you can, really connect, she learned how to imprint a foal when it was born so that she could raise it up. And her stock was just prized because they were so well trained. And so one of the things that happened, she also had a really brilliant orange sapphire, which accounts for her remarkable health and long life. But now the farm, the estate was in the hands of her grandson, Ahern. His name literally means Lord of Horses. And, so I just have to use the line. I'm sorry. It's a cheap line, but she really knew about the whole gem-based magic system because she just used it, but she, of course, kind of kept it under her hat. Don't you like that? Sorry.
Very good, Reed.
I need a boom, boom, or like, Anyway, she, of course, was really prized for her knowledge of horses, and and she let a few people in on her secrets, but she she had a real big name for herself.
Cool. I kind of imagine her being on a bit of the outside. So I kind of like the idea of it's her ranch.
Yeah.
That the quartet members meet Bartholomew.
Well, yeah, because the thing is that, the valley, there's this big valley and a river running through the valley, but with its headwaters in the mountains, and she had found, rich deposits of these sapphires and kind of twigged to the whole, hey, this, kind of by accident figured out that these things, she could understand what, how to get what she wanted out of the beasts. And then little by little began to realize that in select situations, it really helped to be able to use her telepathy with people. And then her empathy and with her orange, working as a healer, but trying not to draw attention to herself, just be in the background for people she cared about and seeing to their healing as well as her own. And then, of course, very careful not to let her telekinesis be found out. But it's handy to be able to, whip a good rock in a certain situation.
I also kind of like the idea that there's lots of people who know.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe the idea that she is one of the original, what's it called? She is one of the original refugees.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And but she's old.
It's been hundreds of years.
Yeah. But she is definitely, descended from like the main scientist for, gene splicing and getting,
right.
Human friendly fauna to adapt to local flora, so to speak. And so she was an expert in the husbandry, breeding of beasts, particularly the runner beasts.
Yeah.
And so she has, by training and by inheriting some carefully preserved knowledge, I toyed around with the idea too that she had a device that and she had that could, maybe, I don't know, an old solar panel or something, so she could, she had access to some of the old logs. She could occasionally power up this device and access some old information to help her with her stuff.
Or maybe it's sort of a thing that gets discovered when some of the natives are there, like the quartet members, and she is kind of explaining to them, how this thing used to work. Like you could do this and along this, but the power is all gone, and the natives are kind of looking at the power and kind of like looking at the wires, and one just starts to hum very softly and just move his hands across the wire.
Yeah, of course he does. Yeah.
And then it starts to like receive power, and she's like, "What? It's happening?" He's like, "I don't understand. This is no different than like, this is no
Earth
different
and fire.
Yeah,
it's
the energy that moves through your own body. Like it's right here. It's all right here." I'm struggling to figure out what our bad guy is going to be, because I kind of made the bad guy so incredibly powerful that there's no way that like medieval level. You have an idea there, Seth?
Right. So in the last episode, trying to get myself out of the food coma here.
Yes, it's Thanksgiving today, just in case anyone wants to know. We're all feeling very full.
Anyway, so in the last episode, we had established that the previous alien, or what did you say, type 3
civilization,
had basically seeded this planet, not necessarily with life, but with, I don't know how this works. I think like with waste materials that over, let's say, 10,000 million years, these materials will have decompressed into mineable resources, seeded the planet with flora and fauna that under a certain time frame, then they come back and basically strip the planet, take the resources, dump a bunch of waste here again, reseed the planet in like a cycle, much like like logging up here. They come through, they cut down, they reseed, and in another 70 years they come back and they cut it again. And that's what this planet is, being that they didn't take high notice of, let's say, other life being here, because it didn't, the life that developed here never got never beyond itself or technologically advanced where they made a huge imprint. So when the cycle came through to come and clear cut the planet, they just sent their drones here and started to work away. Of course, it might take a couple hundred years to strip the planet, even with their, let's say, higher tech, but it is something that's happening. So I think, as far as being a villain, I think the villain itself is the kind of the mechanical force that is basically strip mining the entire planet. So obviously it kind of puts things in an uproar, because it's a whole third party that's kind of well beyond the technological advancement of either party that's on the planet at the moment.
So the answer might be to survive instead of like kill the drones or something like that.
Right. I think our conflict with the thing. Now, I don't know. Do you want me to bring up the happy ending?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to, I have some interesting ideas, but if you want to bring it up, that's totally fine.
I'll bring up the happy ending, and then that might help shape where we want to bring stuff. So I think I know Reed had sequel last time, and then kind of with that being brought in last time, and the drones kind of coming in and clear cutting the necessitable resources off the planet. So I forget what episode it was. It was fairly recent. I think fairly recent, Drone World. If you haven't listened to those, I remember they were very good. So go listen to them. Drone World, I think parts 1, 2, and 3. I might have the episode numbers here.
I can look it up while you're talking. Okay,
so in that, so spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to them, go listen to them.
Right now. Pause the episode and go listen to it and then come back.
All right. And now that you're back, so that you're not...
Wasn't that a great episode?
It was a great 3 episodes, I believe it was. What is found out is, one of the things in there is that either most or a good amount of the population in the world that takes place on was seeded by basically worker drones that had like a particular motive and somehow gained sentience. And
it's episode 148 through 150.
Yeah, and so I can't remember. I can't remember how all of it turned out, but the basic idea was that I can't remember how they gained sentience, but there was something that gives them the life source inside of them that runs them. It'd be like their blood, basically. I think this would tie into, what do you call it? Kind of some of either the material that they're mining off of this planet or the effects of the sapphires. And it, excuse me, I think through a certain influence between the people who have come to this planet, which is something that they've never really dealt with before.
Right.
And so I think a mixture between something that the hero was able to come up with, mixed with something that the indigenous people that I hate to say evolved, but kind of came up through the involvement.
Well, yeah, they evolved, and part of it was the resonance. Like, part of their abilities and who they are is based on the resonance of the sapphires that were put into the soil. Right.
And so I think somehow between that, because they can't fight these drones, and they're kind of organic drones, but they're very mechanical. Like they're not sentient. They're just simply driving forward on a task. However, their creators what's
like
that?
Ants. Like
Yeah,
ants.
like ants. But I think what happens is they are able to adjust the resonance and the between the telepathy and the resonance. They are able to basically feed sentientness into them because they're an organic shell,
Right.
and that also run and function on, let's say, the power and stuff that comes from the sapphires, because obviously that was implanted there by these people before to help shape and push this planet to where they wanted it to be for harvest. And
Right.
that
So
alone kind of powers.
They wake them up?
Basically, because I think in the drone world, they manufacture them. They're like a clone, if I'm remembering right, because I think the villain finds one of these factories in the other thing, and he basically uses his genetic data to create these drones, and you can kind of tweak them to perform certain things, live a certain time frame, and be better at certain aspects to provide, like ants, worker drones. And I think that is whatever civilization that would have come up with that is the same one that has sent these drones, these type of worker drones, to this planet. And whether or not that is how in the drone world that the massive population also gained, let's say, the sentientness, because I think a good amount of the population in that one are, in fact, you find out, these drones, and why they were continuing. I think in the other one, they were continuing trying to mine this one resource, and a good amount of the society was all kind of like trapped at a certain level.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't get past like the need to keep mining this certain resource off the planet.
But they didn't know why.
Yeah. And so I think that plays in, say, possibly well as maybe not a sequel, but maybe as far as like a prequel to this. So in the end of this one, between the indigenous population and the divine council are able to feed in at least a functionable sentientness to the quote unquote invading forces, and it basically stops them from the avert path of just clear cutting the planet. Although that their then intention keeps kind of to develop a third civilization that then possibly takes a large growing part of the population, but seeds in at least the stop and thought to be, wow, I'm an individual and now I need to start making this life for myself here.
You know what it could be? Here's a terrifying idea. I don't know if it's a happy ending or not, but I really like that, Seth. What it could be was that the refugees and the natives are all basically they've got together and they've gathered together and they're allies now, and the refugees the natives talk about these huge in the mountains, these huge underground cities they have, right? From some past great thing. It's from some past great strip mining operation. And they basically Noah's Ark them, and they say, we're going to go. And the hero and the content member and the wise old woman, they're working on this plan to awaken these drones. And this entire book is the prequel to the Drone World book, where basically they awaken them and then they escape, and they say, we're going to lock the doors, but at however many hundreds of years, we're going to come back, because we can't be here raising the drones to be sentient on how we want. They're like children. They have to learn how to do it themselves. So they basically say, go. The couple that they've awoken that are kind of like trying to figure out what to do, they say, go, do this process, this complex process with the empathy sapphire, with the electrical thing, with the instructions written by the horse lady. to sort of do this thing. All of them kind of contribute to this kind of awakening process that they start to do to them, and all the humans and all the natives basically go and hide. They say, we're good for like 50 years. We'll come out after that and see what's happening, because we can't survive in the atmosphere that's being created here, so they have to go. And then that is the beginning of the drone world story, where then now you pick up in the drone world story, and the drones are kind of going, just cutting down the forests and just doing all these things, and they don't really know why. They've been awakened by something, and they don't really know what it was or why, and then they slowly get their sentience. And then we could make a little, besides that, at the end of that drone world book, the big vault door would open and out would come the humans and the natives, now that the sort of environment has settled down again, to sort of, what do you think about that? Is that too terrible different from yours?
No, not particularly. What I had put together, tried to figure out, is how then basically these drones that either surface or have come to the planet to clear cut and do all this, the happy ending is that it's averted by somehow kind of pushing them over the edge of sentientness.
Yeah.
Because the shell is already there. And I think between the power between, the vibration of the natives and the telepathic abilities of the Great Council would somehow be able to impress, or let's say aliven, those organic drones into a state of individual sentientness.
Yeah. I was thinking what you'd have to do is you'd have to take the empathetic, someone wielding the empathy emerald sapphire, right? And then you'd have to connect to them telekinetically, and then you'd have to imprint onto them the empathy of a innocent human, right? Someone who wasn't pre-filled with greed or self-doubt or whatever. And there's where the hero is.
Right.
Right? A simple man with a great family, has, his family has been good to him. He's been taught to work hard. He's been taught to love other people. He's not filled with self-doubt. He's not filled with malice. He's like a template for potential. And so they basically use his psyche as a template, and then use the telekinetic and empathetic sapphires to imprint on to the drones, which then gives the possibility for something different. And it doesn't all happen in a day. You don't go from having the possibility for sentience to thinking complex psychological issues. You kind of take it one day at a time and experience new things and put them back into the brain and see how they work around, and then come out with what you're thinking. It takes a while to build up conclusions like that.
It's interesting that Epona has the experience of dealing with the simple, kind of more fuzzy thought processes of the lower beasts by using her telepathy on the horses. She's had to bridge that gap of what understanding they're capable of.
Right, exactly.
And animals, you can't train animals if you're given to fits of rage, for example. If you're given to, they respond negatively to negative emotions, unless, a war horse can sense the urgency, but it is powered by the bonding with their human,
Right, exactly. So is that an okay way that could happen, Seth?
Yeah, I think so.
That's great.
I think we can leave it at that. And if we do anything else, let's say in some kind of future project that might do anything with them, I think any other let's say small nuances can be worked out then. But
Yeah,
think
I
that's
really like
pretty
this
close to-
connecting two different stories together. I would really like to at some point get all of our stories out in front of us and kind of see how they kind of lock together and start supporting some of that locking together in order to create some kind of fleshed out universes. I keep thinking of Stephen King's Dark Tower series.
Yeah.
And then I keep thinking of the one of our first stories, my COT 10 members were just like this beautiful, what was it called? The egg-shaped. It was just one of the first stories. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I remember.
But it was like, there was just this beautiful quartet members that I thought would be really cool if they were to show up in a different episode somewhere else, and then we could see that they're like, these are parts of the same universe. The egg-shaped nanites and the gardener. That was the episode 2, in fact.
Yeah.
Anyways, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you like this episode and the culmination of this 3-part series, just let us know, if you wouldn't mind, waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com, or add us on Twitter at @getsbettercast, or don't. As long as you keep listening, we will keep making these. If you want to hear more episodes like this, we can be found iTunes, Google, Podlink, anywhere you can find episodes of podcasts, you can find us. And I will just say thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye.